I watched him stir the honey into my chamomile tea with a kind of care that would have looked like love to anyone else. Slow, precise, practiced. The spoon circled the cup without a single clink, as if even the sound had been rehearsed. Steam curled upward between us, soft and harmless, carrying the faint scent of herbs and sweetness. Victor always made the tea himself. He said it helped me sleep. He said it was his way of taking care of me. He lifted the cup slightly, testing the temperature with the back of his finger, then blew across the surface twice. Gentle, measured, perfect. Then he smiled. It was the same smile I had trusted for years. Calm, reassuring, familiar enough to pass for love. "Drink up," he said quietly. "You've been exhausted lately." His voice was warm, controlled, almost soothing. But his eyes did not match the warmth. There was something behind them, something small, something sharp, a flicker that didn't belong in a moment like this. Not concern, not love, impatience. The kind of impatience you only see in someone waiting for something to happen, waiting for a result. I took the cup from his hand, careful not to let my fingers shake. The porcelain was warm against my skin, normal, safe. At least, that's how it would look to anyone watching. I brought it to my lips slowly, letting the steam brush against my face. I paused just long enough to make it believable, just long enough to satisfy him. Then I pretended to take a sip. Victor watched me closely, not like a husband, like a man checking whether something had worked. I swallowed nothing and smiled back, because he didn't know. He didn't know that 3 months ago, I found the truth hidden where he thought no one would ever look. He didn't know that every single night since then, I had been changing the rules of his little routine. Quietly, carefully, perfectly. He didn't know. I stopped drinking his tea 3 months ago. And tonight would be the 91st time. He poisoned himself instead. From the outside, the marriage looked effortless. Elena Ward and Victor Ward were the kind of couple people pointed at, without saying a word. Wealth, elegance, control. Everything about their life suggested stability. Victor was a billionaire with a reputation for precision. Every deal calculated. Every move intentional. He spoke less than most men in his position, but when he did, people listened. Elena was different. Not quieter. Not weaker. Just sharper in a way that didn't demand attention. A financial analyst by profession, she had spent years studying patterns, discrepancies, and the kind of small details most people overlooked. Numbers made sense to her. Systems made sense to her. People were more complicated. Still, for 7 years, Victor had never felt like a mystery she couldn't solve. He was attentive, predictable, structured, a good husband. At least, that was the version everyone saw. The house they lived in reflected that same illusion. Clean lines, soft lighting, everything in its place. Nothing out of order. Nothing until recently. It started after her father died. The timing was almost too convenient to question at first. Grief has a way of distorting everything. Sleep becomes irregular. Thoughts become heavier. The body slows down in ways that feel natural, expected. That's what Elena told herself in the beginning. That's what Victor told her too. "You've been through a lot," he would say, his voice low and steady. Anyone would be exhausted. And she believed him, because the exhaustion was real. It wasn't the kind that comes from long hours or lack of rest. It was deeper, heavier. Like waking up didn't actually mean being awake. She would open her eyes late in the morning, sometimes close to 10, with a dull pressure behind her temples. Not sharp enough to panic, just constant enough to ignore at first. Victor would already be up, dressed, composed, standing by the bed with a cup of coffee, and that same familiar expression of concern. "You didn't move all night," he would say. "You must have needed it." Elena would sit up slowly, trying to piece together the night before. Sometimes she could. Sometimes she couldn't. That was the part she didn't talk about. At first, it was small things. Forgetting where she left her phone. Walking into a room and losing the reason she went there. Normal things. Harmless things. Until they weren't. One afternoon, she reached for a pair of diamond earrings her father had given her years ago. They weren't there. She checked the drawer again. Then the jewelry box. Then every surface in the room. Nothing. Victor found her standing there, staring at the open drawer like it might explain itself. "Looking for something?" he asked. "My earrings," she said. "The ones my dad gave me." He didn't hesitate. "You probably misplaced them," he said calmly. "You've been doing that a lot lately." There was no accusation in his tone. No frustration. Just quiet certainty. And somehow that made it worse. Because it sounded reasonable. Because it sounded true. Elena frowned slightly, trying to recall the last time she had worn them. She couldn't. And that was enough to plant out. Not in him. In herself. The pattern repeated. A vintage watch disappeared. Important documents ended up in the wrong folders. Once, she found her own keys in the refrigerator. Each time, Victor responded the same way. Calm. Understanding. Concerned. "You're overworking your brain," he would say. "You need to slow down. You're forgetting things. You're not yourself lately." The words never came all at once. They came slowly, carefully, like drops of water wearing down stone. And the more he said it, the more it started to feel real. Elena began questioning her own routines, then her own memory, then her own judgment. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't happen overnight. It happened quietly. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel dangerous until it's already too late. But there was one thing that didn't fit. One detail that refused to settle into the explanation he kept offering. The exhaustion. It wasn't improving. It wasn't fluctuating. It was getting worse. And it didn't behave like stress. Stress fades. It shifts. It reacts. This didn't. This was consistent. Predictable. Almost timed. That was the first moment something inside her resisted the narrative. Not loudly. Not completely. Just enough to create friction. And Elena Ward had spent her entire career trusting friction. Because friction meant something wasn't adding up. She didn't confront Victor. She didn't accuse. She didn't even mention it. Instead, she did what she had always done when something didn't make sense. She started tracking it. The next morning, she bought a small black notebook. Nothing expensive. Nothing noticeable. She kept it in her drawer, beneath folded clothes where no one would think to look. And that night, before she went to bed, she wrote her first entry. Time she fell asleep. How she felt. What she remembered. What she didn't. The next morning, she added more. Wake up time. Headache level. Missing details. She kept it simple. Clean. Objective. Like data. Day by day, the entries began to form a pattern. A pattern she didn't fully understand yet, but one she couldn't ignore. Because the numbers were starting to say something her mind wasn't ready to accept. And as she closed the notebook on the seventh night, one thought settled in with quiet certainty. If she couldn't trust her own memory, she would trust the record instead. The notebook did not lie. That was the first thing Elena understood. It did not hesitate. It did not forget. It did not adjust itself to make things feel comfortable. It simply recorded and waited to be read. By the 10th day, the pattern was impossible to ignore. She was going to bed at roughly the same time every night, between 9:30 and 10. That part made sense. What didn't make sense was what came after. Every single morning, she woke up at almost the exact same time. Late, heavy, disoriented. Not once did she wake up in the middle of the night. Not once did she remember turning in bed. Not once did she remember dreaming. It was as if someone had turned her off and then turned her back on again. Clean, controlled, unnatural. Elena didn't react outwardly. She didn't change her behavior. She didn't confront Victor. Instead, she watched. Carefully, quietly. Victor's routines were precise, almost mechanical. He woke up at 6 every morning. Gym by 6:30. Back by 8. Showered. Dressed. Coffee ready before she opened her eyes. At night, it was the same. Dinner. Conversation. Light television. And then the tea. Always the tea. Prepared by him. Served by him. Watched by him. Elena began to track that too. Time he entered the kitchen. Time he returned. The exact moment he handed her the cup. At first, it felt excessive. Then it started to feel necessary. Because the more she wrote, the more one detail stood out above everything else. Her exhaustion always followed the tea. Not the stress. Not the day. The tea. The realization didn't come as a shock. It came slowly, like something rising through fog. Unclear at first, then sharper, then impossible to ignore. But suspicion is not proof. And Elena Ward did not act on suspicion. She waited. She watched longer, until the opportunity presented itself. It happened on a Tuesday. There was nothing special about the day itself. No argument. No tension. No warning. Victor came home from the gym earlier than usual, just by a few minutes. Enough to disrupt the pattern slightly. He went upstairs to shower, leaving his gym bag on the floor near the hallway table. Unzipped. Unattended. Elena noticed it immediately. Not because she was looking for it. Because she was looking for everything. She walked past it once. Then again. Her pace slowed just slightly the second time. Her eyes dropped for half a second. That was all it took. The zipper was open just enough to see inside. Clothes. Towel. Water bottle. Normal. Nothing out of place. She kept walking. Reached the kitchen. Stopped. Something didn't sit right. It wasn't visible. It wasn't obvious. It was instinct. And instinct, she had learned, was data her mind had not processed yet. Elena turned around. Slowly. Walked back toward the bag. No rush. No hesitation. Just a quiet return. She knelt down beside it, her movements controlled, measured, listening for any sound from upstairs. The shower was running. Steady. Consistent. She reached inside. Moved the towel aside. Shifted the clothes. Her fingers brushed against something firm. Not fabric. Not plastic. Something harder. Hidden. Her hand paused. For a second, she considered stopping. Closing the bag. Walking away. Pretending she had never touched it. But the notebook was already filled with questions. And this felt like an answer. She pressed her fingers deeper into the lining. There. Something had been stitched into the bottom of the bag. Not professionally. Carefully, but deliberately. Her heartbeat slowed. Not faster. Slower. Focused. Elena pinched the seam and pulled gently. It didn't open, so she pulled harder. The thread gave way with a soft tear, and something small slipped into her hand. A vial. Blue glass. No label. No markings. Just a thick, viscous liquid sitting inside it, almost glowing under the light. For a moment, Elena didn't breathe. She didn't move. She just stared at it. Because this was no longer instinct. This was evidence. And with it came something immediate. Something sharp. Fear. Not the loud kind. Not panic. This was colder. Heavier. The kind of fear that settles into your chest and stays there. Because it means something is real. And once something is real, it cannot be undone. Footsteps above. Water shutting off. Elena moved instantly. The vial disappeared into her sleeve. The torn seam pressed back into place. The bag closed. Positioned exactly as it had been. By the time Victor stepped out of the bathroom, Elena was already in the kitchen. Standing by the counter. Still. Normal. Waiting. That night, she drank the tea. Or, at least she pretended to. Because now, the question was no longer if something was wrong. The question was what? And Elena Ward did not guess. She verified. The next morning, she left the house earlier than usual. No explanation. No hesitation. Just a simple message to Victor. Running errands. Her destination was not a store. It was a private lab. Quiet. Discreet. Expensive enough not to ask unnecessary questions. She handed over a small sample of the liquid. No name attached. No story given. Just a request. Tell me what this is. The wait took 48 hours. 48 hours of routine. Of tea. Of pretending. Of watching Victor smile the same way he always did. Of writing in the notebook with hands that no longer felt entirely steady. When the call finally came, Elena didn't answer immediately. She let it ring once. Twice. Then she picked up. The voice on the other end was professional. Detached. Your sample has been analyzed. A pause. Then, it's a high-concentration sedative. Elena said nothing. She listened. In small doses, it induces deep sleep and short-term memory loss. Another pause. Slightly longer this time. In repeated use over time, it can cause lasting cognitive impairment. Silence filled the space between them. Not empty. Heavy. Final. Elena thanked them, hung up, and sat in her car without moving. The world outside continued normally. People walked past. Cars moved. Nothing had changed, except everything had. The exhaustion, the memory gaps, the missing pieces of her own life. It all aligned, not with stress, not with grief, with him, Victor, her husband, the man who made her tea every night, the man who watched her drink it, the man who told her she was forgetting things. He wasn't concerned. He wasn't helping. He was creating the problem and then explaining it away. Slowly, carefully, systematically. Elena leaned back in her seat, her eyes fixed forward, but seeing nothing in front of her. Because the truth wasn't something she could look at directly. Not all at once. It had to settle, piece by piece. He had been drugging her, night after night, weakening her mind, blurring her memory, eroding her ability to trust herself. And for what? The answer came without effort. Her father's estate. The inheritance. The control. If she could not think clearly, she could not protect it. If she could not remember, she could not fight. If she could not function, she could be declared unfit. And everything she had would become his. The precision of it was what made it unbearable. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. This was planned, calculated, executed over time. Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment. Not to escape, but to steady herself, because panic would destroy her. Emotion would expose her. And Victor was watching. That part she knew now, with absolute certainty. So when she opened her eyes again, something had changed. Not outside, inside. The fear was still there, but it was no longer in control. Understanding had replaced it, and understanding gave her something Victor did not expect. Strategy. That night, when he handed her the tea again, Elena smiled, took the cup, lifted it slowly, and pretended to drink. Because now she knew the truth. And more importantly, she knew what he thought was happening. And that gave her the advantage. A small one. A dangerous one. But enough. Because as she set the cup down and met his eyes, one thought moved through her mind with perfect clarity. He wasn't trying to help her sleep. He was trying to erase her. Elena did not confront him. That was the first real decision she made after learning the truth. Not because she was afraid, but because she understood something Victor did not. The moment you reveal what you know, you lose the advantage. And Elena Ward had spent her entire career protecting advantages. So she said nothing. She did not accuse him. She did not question him. She did not even change her expression. If anything, she became easier, quieter, more agreeable. Exactly what Victor expected her to become. And that was the point. Because while he believed the fog was getting thicker, Elena was becoming sharper than she had ever been. The plan came to her the same way the pattern had. Slowly, logically, inevitably. If the T was the delivery method, then the T was the control point. And control could be redirected. The idea itself was simple. Almost too simple. Swap the cups. But simplicity did not make it easy. Because it had to be perfect. Every movement, every second, every glance. Victor was watching. He always watched. That was part of the ritual. The tea was not just about the drug. It was about confirmation. He needed to see her drink it. He needed to believe it worked, which meant Elena had to give him exactly what he expected, while changing everything underneath it. The first attempt came the following night. Dinner ended the same way it always did. Quiet conversation. Measured tone. Victor stood up first. "I'll make the tea," he said. Of course he would. Elena nodded, offering a small smile as she gathered the plates. Her hands moved normally. Her breathing stayed even. Nothing rushed. Nothing forced. Because the moment had to feel ordinary. Victor returned a few minutes later, carrying both cups on a tray. Steam rising. Scent familiar. Poison hidden. He set them down on the table. One in front of her. One in front of himself. Just like always. Elena watched his hands. Not his face. His hands. Steady. Controlled. No hesitation. He had done this too many times to make mistakes. Which meant the mistake had to be hers. He leaned back slightly in his chair, his eyes settling on her. Waiting. That same quiet expectation. That same flicker behind the calm. Elena reached for her cup. Slowly. Naturally. Just as she had every night before. Her fingers wrapped around the handle. Warm. Familiar. Dangerous. She lifted it halfway to her lips. Paused. Then lowered it again. Just slightly. "Did you lock the back door?" she asked, her tone casual, almost absent. Victor blinked once. The question was small. Harmless. But it broke the rhythm. "I think so," he said. "I'm not sure," Elena replied, tilting her head slightly. "I thought I heard something earlier." A pause. Not long. Just enough. Victor exhaled quietly and stood up. "I'll check." He turned toward the hallway. And in that moment, everything shifted. Elena moved. Fast. Precise. Silent. The cups switched positions in less than a second. No sound. No hesitation. No trace. By the time Victor returned, Elena was already lifting the cup again. The correct one. His cup. Now hers. Now empty of threat. She took a small sip. Just enough to sell it. Victor watched her. Then nodded to himself, almost imperceptibly, and reached for his own cup. Elena didn't watch him directly. She didn't need to. She could feel it. The moment he drank. The moment the pattern broke. The moment control changed hands. Conversation resumed. Normal. Unremarkable. But underneath it, everything was different. Elena kept her responses short. Measured. She matched his tone. Matched his pace. Because the real focus was not the conversation. It was time. 10 minutes. Nothing. 20 minutes. A slight shift. Victor leaned back in his chair a little more than usual. His hand paused halfway to the table. 30 minutes. His speech slowed. Just enough that someone else might miss it. Elena didn't. She caught every hesitation. Every fraction of a second delay. 40 minutes. Victor stood up. Or tried to. His balance adjusted mid-motion. Subtle. Controlled. But wrong. "I think I'm more tired than I thought," he said, his voice still steady, but heavier. Elena nodded. "You've been working a lot," she replied softly. He smiled. That same familiar smile. But it lingered too long. Like he was holding it in place instead of letting it happen. He walked toward the living room. Sat down. And within minutes, he was asleep. Not natural sleep. Not rest. This was deeper. Heavier. Exactly what the lab had described. Elena stood in the doorway, watching him. Her hands were still, her breathing steady, but her mind was moving faster than ever. Because this confirmed everything. Not just the drug, not just the plan, the control. For the first time in weeks, Victor was the one losing awareness. Victor was the one slipping. Victor was the one vulnerable. Elena stepped closer, studied his face. The same face that had watched her every night. The same eyes that had measured her decline. Now closed. Unaware. Unprotected. She could have acted right then. Called someone. Left the house. Ended it. But something held her in place. Not fear. Clarity. Because leaving would solve nothing. Victor would recover. Explain. Rewrite the story. And she would still be the one losing. No. This was bigger than escape. This required proof. And proof required time. So Elena stepped back, turned off the lights, and let him sleep. The next night, she did it again. Same distraction. Same movement. Same silent switch. Victor drank. Victor slowed. Victor slept. And each time, Elena watched, measured, recorded. The notebook changed. New entries. New data. Not about her symptoms anymore. About his. Day 3. Day 7. Day 14. The pattern held. Perfectly. Victor never questioned it. Not once. Because, from his perspective, everything was working. Elena still looked tired. Still moved slower. Still played the part. She stumbled occasionally. Repeated questions. Let her focus drift just enough. Just enough to reinforce his belief. And that belief blinded him. That was the psychological edge. Not the swap. The illusion. He saw what he expected to see. And ignored everything else. But something else began to shift. Small at first. Then clearer. Victor changed. Not dramatically. Subtly. His patience shortened. His attention fractured. He forgot small details. Repeated questions the same way she used to. The irony wasn't lost on her. But she didn't react. She didn't push. She let it develop. Because every day that passed, he sank deeper into the same fog he had built for her. And still, he believed he was in control. That was when Elena understood something deeper. This wasn't just about money. Money was the surface, the justification, the visible reward. But underneath it, this was about control. Total control. Control of perception. Control of reality. Control of a person's ability to trust their own mind. Victor didn't just want her assets. He wanted her dependence. He wanted her uncertainty. He wanted her erased. That realization didn't scare her. It sharpened her. Because now she knew exactly what she was fighting. And more importantly, how to fight it. But then, something else entered the pattern. Something new. Something she hadn't accounted for. Victor's phone. He had always been protective of it. That part wasn't unusual. But now, it was different. More frequent checks. Shorter messages. Lock screens turned away from her. Calls taken in other rooms. His tone shifted during those calls. Lower. Tighter. More urgent. Elena didn't ask. She listened. Fragments only. Names without context. Times without explanation. Once, she heard a voice on speaker. Female. Sharp. Unfamiliar. Another time, she caught a glimpse of a message. Just a line. Is she under yet? Victor had turned the screen away before she could read more. But she didn't need more. Because the pattern had changed. And when patterns change, it means variables have been introduced. New ones. Dangerous ones. Elena added it to the notebook. Not as a conclusion. As a question. Because questions lead to answers. And answers change everything. That night, as Victor handed her the tea again, his movements slightly slower than they had been weeks ago, Elena took the cup with the same calm expression. The same quiet smile. The same performance. But inside, the structure of the situation had shifted. This was no longer a two-person game. And as she executed the swap once more, her movements just as precise as the first night, one thought settled into place with absolute certainty. Victor was not working alone. And whatever came next was going to be bigger than both of them. The first sign was not obvious. It never is. Not when something is designed to stay hidden. It began with a reflection. Not a sound. Not a movement. A reflection. Elena was standing beside the bed, adjusting the lamp, her movements slow and deliberate, the same careful rhythm she had practiced for weeks. Her role had not changed. She was still the tired wife. Still the one losing focus. Still the one drifting. At least, that was what Victor believed. She reached for the lampshade, tilting it slightly, and for a fraction of a second something caught her eye. A flicker. So small it could have been dismissed. So brief it almost didn't exist. But Elena did not dismiss things. She studied them. The flicker came from above. Not the ceiling. Closer. She didn't look directly at it. That would have been a mistake. Instead, she shifted her position slightly, letting her gaze move naturally, as if she were simply scanning the room. The smoke detector. Plain. White. Unremarkable. Exactly the kind of object no one ever questions. But the flicker had come from there. A tiny glint. Almost purple. Almost invisible. Elena's heartbeat did not increase. It slowed. Because now, her mind was no longer guessing. It was calculating. She finished adjusting the lamp, turned it off, and lay down beside Victor as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Because that flicker was not random. It was mechanical. And mechanical things are built for a purpose. She waited, counted his breathing, measured the rhythm. 30 minutes passed. Victor's body sank deeper into the mattress. His breathing slowed. Heavy. Unconscious. Elena opened her eyes. The room was dark now. Still. Silent. But not empty. She reached slowly toward the nightstand and picked up the small metal object she had placed there earlier. A letter opener. Polished. Reflective. Not for defense. For sight. She had read about it once. A simple method. If a lens is present, it reflects. She sat up carefully, making no sound, and angled the blade upward. Moved it slowly across the room. Nothing. Bookshelf. Nothing. Television. Nothing. Then, there it was again. A tiny spark. From the smoke detector. Confirmed. Elena lowered the blade. And for the first time since this began, something sharp cut through her control. Not panic. Not fear. Violation. Because this was no longer about sleep. No longer about memory. He wasn't just drugging her. He was watching her. Recording her. Studying her decline like it was data. Building something. Collecting something. Proof. The realization settled in with a cold precision. Victor wasn't just weakening her. He was documenting it. Creating a record. A narrative. One that could be shown to anyone. Doctors. Lawyers. Authorities. A woman who forgets things. Who stumbles. Who cannot function. A woman who needs help. A woman who cannot be trusted with her own decisions. Elena closed her eyes briefly. Not to escape. To stabilize. Because emotion, in that moment, would have been a mistake. And mistakes would cost her everything. So when she opened her eyes again, the violation was still there. But it was contained. Controlled. Converted into something usable. Strategy. She did not remove the camera. That would have been the instinct. But instinct was not enough. If she removed it, Victor would know. If Victor knew, the plan would change. And if the plan changed, she would lose visibility. No, the camera stayed. And Elena adapted. The next morning, she became worse. Not suddenly. Gradually. Believably. She stumbled when she stood up. Let her hand brush the wall, as if she needed support. She repeated questions she already knew the answers to. Victor, have you seen my phone? While holding it. Did I eat already? When the plate was still in front of her, Victor watched. Closely. And for the first time, Elena saw something new in his expression. Satisfaction. Not concern. Not worry. Pride. Like a man watching his work come to life. Don't worry, he said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. I'll take care of everything. Everything. The word lingered. Because now she understood what everything meant. Her decisions. Her assets. Her identity. Her life. And Elena nodded slowly, lowering her gaze just enough to sell it. Thank you, she said softly. Playing the part. Feeding the narrative. Giving the camera exactly what it needed to see. Day after day, she performed. Carefully. Measured. Never too much. Never too little. Because exaggeration would create suspicion. Consistency created belief. And Victor believed. More with each passing day. But belief makes people careless. And careless people leave openings. Elena found hers on a Friday afternoon. Victor had left his office door slightly open. Not wide. Just enough. Inside, his phone sat on the desk. Unlocked. Charging. A rare mistake. A critical one. Elena moved slowly. Listen first. No footsteps. No movement. Just silence. She stepped inside. Closed the door behind her halfway. Not fully. Just enough to maintain the illusion. Her eyes moved to the phone. Screen lit. Messages open. She didn't hesitate. Picked it up. Scrolled. And then, everything shifted. The messages were not business. Not associates. Not transactions. They were personal. Direct. Precise. A name repeated again and again. Sophia. Sophia Blake. Elena's breath paused for half a second. Not from confusion. From recognition. Sophia. her closest friend. Years of trust. Years of shared conversations. Shared memories. Shared loyalty. Or so she believed. Elena kept reading. Message after message. Each one colder than the last. Is she under tonight? Yes. Same dose. Good. We need consistency for the report. Lawyer says we're close. Once the specialist signs, it's done. Elena's grip tightened slightly around the phone, but her face did not change. She kept scrolling. Photos. Attachments. Videos. Short clips. Her. Walking slowly. Forgetting things. Repeating herself. Captured. Cataloged. Packaged. Evidence. Not of illness. Of manipulation. Transfer schedule is ready. We move the assets in phases. Offshore accounts are set. Once she's declared incompetent, everything transfers clean. Then one message stood out. Short. Direct. Final. We need her fully gone within the month. Elena stopped scrolling. Not because there was nothing left. Because she had seen enough. This was not control anymore. This was removal. Permanent. Complete. She placed the phone back exactly where it had been. Same angle. Same position. No trace. Then she stepped out of the office and returned to the hallway. Her movements just as slow, just as unsteady as before. The performance never broke. Not for a second. But inside, the structure had collapsed. Victor was not alone. Sophia was not just involved. She was part of it. Active. Committed. Strategic. And together, they were not just trying to take her life apart. They were trying to erase her from it. Legally, financially, physically. Elena walked back into the bedroom and sat down on the edge of the bed. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, her breathing steady. But her thoughts were no longer moving in fragments. They were aligned, clear, focused. Because now the situation was fully visible. The drugs, the camera, the documentation, the legal setup, the asset transfer, the timeline, every piece connected, every move deliberate, and every move pointing to the same conclusion. They were not waiting for her to break. They were preparing for what came after. Elena lowered her head slightly, letting her expression soften into the same distant confusion she had been performing all week. Because the camera was still there, still watching, still recording, and now it would capture exactly what she wanted it to see. Weakness, disorientation, decline, all of it carefully constructed, all of it controlled, because the only way to win this was to let them believe they already had. And as the silence settled around her, one thought formed with absolute clarity. They weren't waiting for her to break. They were planning to finish her. By the time Victor changed the routine, Elena was already expecting it. Not the exact method, but the shift. Because control, when it starts slipping, does not stay still. It adapts. It escalates. And Victor Ward was not the kind of man who tolerated uncertainty. The tea had become predictable, manageable, safe for her, which meant eventually he would abandon it. The change came on a night that felt too quiet. No conversation at dinner. No soft reassurances. No mention of her progress. Just silence. Measured. Deliberate. The kind of silence that replaces planning. Elena followed her routine. Slow movements. Unsteady steps. Eyes slightly unfocused. Every detail of her performance intact. Because the camera was still watching. Because Victor was still observing. Because the illusion had to hold. She lay in bed early. Earlier than usual. Let her breathing settle. Let her body sink into the mattress. And then, she waited. Minutes passed. Then more. The house remained still. Until, footsteps. Slow. Careful. Not the relaxed rhythm of habit. This was different. Intentional. Victor entered the room without turning on the light. He didn't speak. Didn't announce himself. Elena kept her eyes closed. Her breathing even. Unconscious in appearance only. She felt him move closer. He stood beside the bed for a moment. Watching. Confirming. Just as he always did. But tonight there was no cup. No tray. No scent of chamomile. Only silence. And then, a sound. Small, metallic, almost delicate. Elena recognized it instantly. Not from experience. From instinct. From logic. A cap being removed. Her pulse slowed. Not faster. Slower. Because panic would expose her. And exposure would end everything. Victor's shadow shifted. Closer now. Near her side. The mattress dipped slightly as he leaned in. And then, she felt it. Not the needle. Not yet. The presence of it. Hovering. Waiting. The air itself felt sharper. More precise. Time stretched. Every second longer than it should have been. Because this was no longer about control. This was execution. Victor had moved beyond the slow erosion. Beyond the careful manipulation. This was direct. Immediate. Permanent. The needle approached. Closer. Closer. And in that suspended moment, Elena made her move. Not physical. Not yet. Strategic. Her hand shifted slightly beneath the blanket. Invisible. Controlled. Her fingers found the small device she had hidden earlier that evening. Prepared. Just in case. Because strategy anticipates escalation. Her thumb pressed down. A single click. Silent to the human ear. But not to the system. Downstairs, the security alarm triggered. Loud. Sharp. Violent. It shattered the silence instantly. Victor froze. The needle stopped midair. What the? The alarm continued, relentless. Victor straightened quickly, his movements no longer controlled. No longer calculated. Reactive. Stay here, he snapped, his voice no longer soft. No longer careful. Then he turned and moved out of the room. Fast. Elena waited. Counted. 1, 2, 3. Then her eyes opened. Clear. Focused. Alive. She sat up immediately, the performance gone in an instant. Because now the game had changed. The alarm would not hold him for long. It was not meant to. It was a disruption. A break in the sequence. A window. And Elena used it. She moved out of bed silently. Her feet steady. Her body precise. No hesitation. No wasted movement. She crossed the hallway and stopped just before the staircase. Listened. Victor was downstairs, cursing under his breath, disarming the system, resetting, distracted. That was enough. Elena turned, not toward the front door, not toward escape, toward the kitchen, because she already knew what came next. Victor had escalated once. He would escalate again, faster, more aggressively. And if the messages were accurate, there was another plan. The smell confirmed it before she even reached the doorway. Faint, sharp, unmistakable. Gas. Elena stopped. Not out of fear, out of calculation. Because now the situation was no longer controlled. It was volatile. One spark, one mistake, and everything would end exactly the way Victor needed it to. An accident, a tragedy, a clean conclusion. Elena moved forward slowly, her steps deliberate, her breathing controlled. The stove knobs had been turned. Not fully, just enough. The line was open, silent, invisible, lethal. She knelt down beside it, her hands steady as she reached forward, turned the valve back. One, then the next. Each movement precise, measured, because speed would create error, and error would create ignition. The room remained still. No spark, no explosion, just silence, and the faint echo of the alarm shutting off downstairs. Elena exhaled slowly, but she did not stop, because stopping meant losing momentum. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, opened the recording app, set it down on the counter, angle adjusted, sound clear, because proof needed to be captured. Footsteps returned, faster now, heavier, closer. Victor entered the kitchen abruptly. His expression was no longer composed, no longer controlled. It was something else now. Frustration, urgency, and beneath it, fear. He stopped when he saw her standing there, awake, still, watching him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them, heavier than anything that had come before. Elena, he began slowly. Too slowly. Too carefully. Like he was trying to rebuild control in real time. You should be in bed. She didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't break eye contact. Because the performance was over. And for the first time, Victor saw it. Not confusion. Not weakness. Clarity. Awareness. Understanding. His expression shifted. Just slightly. But enough. You weren't supposed to, he stopped himself. Too late. The sentence had already exposed him. Elena tilted her head slightly. Calm. Measured. You changed the method, she said quietly. Her voice steady. Controlled. Not accusing. Not emotional. Just factual. Victor's jaw tightened. His mind moved quickly. Calculating. Adjusting. Searching for a new version of the story. But there wasn't one. Not anymore. Because the structure had collapsed. You've been playing this game for months, Elena continued. Still calm. Still steady. And you still think you're ahead. Victor took a step forward. Slow. Cautious. But not confident. Not anymore. You don't understand what's happening, he said. But the words lacked weight. Because he knew. She did. Elena didn't step back. Didn't flinch. Because fear no longer served her. I understand exactly what's happening, she replied. A pause. Then softer. More precise. You just didn't expect me to. That was the moment. The shift. The reversal. Victor's controlled gone. Elena's absolute. Sirens sounded in the distance. Faint at first. Then closer. Victor's head turned slightly toward the sound. Just enough. Just long enough. Realization hit him. Not confusion. Recognition. Because now he understood. This wasn't a disruption. This was a setup. Elena had not just survived. She had planned, documented, executed. And now she had escalated beyond him. He looked back at her. And for the first time since this began, Victor Ward did not look in control. The sirens grew louder, closer, unavoidable. But Elena's expression did not change. Because this moment was not the end. Not yet. Because even as Victor stood there, caught between collapse and calculation, one final piece moved into place inside her mind. The messages, the coordination, the timing, the precision. Victor had played his role, but he had never been the one directing it. And as the sound of approaching authority filled the silence, one truth settled in with quiet certainty. Victor wasn't the mastermind, and the real threat was already escaping. The sirens did not stop. They grew louder, closer, until the sound itself became unavoidable. Victor didn't run. That was the first thing Elena noticed. He didn't panic, didn't reach for an excuse, didn't try to escape through the back door or disappear into the night. He stood still, watching her, calculating, because even now he was thinking, still trying to find a way out, still trying to rebuild control from what remained. But this time, there was nothing left to rebuild. The front door opened. Voices entered the house. Sharp, clear, authoritative. Stay where you are. Footsteps followed. Fast, coordinated. Victor's posture shifted slightly. Not fear. Not yet. Recognition. Because the situation had crossed a line that could not be reversed. Elena didn't move. Didn't speak. She simply stood there as the officers entered the kitchen, their presence filling the space that had once belonged entirely to Victor. Questions were asked. Instructions were given. Hands were raised. Metal clicked into place. And just like that, Victor Ward was no longer in control of anything. He turned his head once more, looked at Elena, not with anger, not with regret, with something quieter, something colder, understanding. Because now, he knew. He hadn't lost by accident. He had been outplayed. Completely. The house fell silent again after they took him away. Not the same silence as before. Not controlled. Not artificial. This one was real. Empty. Final. Elena stood alone in the kitchen. The faint scent of gas still lingering in the air. Now harmless. Now irrelevant. Because the danger had shifted. It was no longer inside the house. It had moved outward, into systems, into records, into everything Victor had built behind the scenes, and everything he had tried to hide. The story did not stay contained for long. It never does. Not when money is involved. Not when power collapses. Not when evidence exists. Within days, the narrative began to surface. Carefully, at first. Then faster. Reports. Investigations. Quiet inquiries turning into public exposure. A billionaire husband. A controlled narrative. A pattern of manipulation. Medical consultations arranged in advance. Legal documentation prepared. Every piece aligned to one outcome. Incompetency. Transfer of control. Total acquisition. But now, there was another layer. Evidence of drugging. Recorded footage. Hidden surveillance. Coordinated communication. The story changed. Not speculation. Not accusation. Proof. Victor Ward was no longer the architect of a quiet takeover. He was the subject of a criminal investigation. And everything he had built was now being taken apart, piece by piece. But Elena did not celebrate. She did not speak publicly. She did not correct the narrative. Because she understood something the world did not. Victor had never been the most dangerous part of the equation. That truth revealed itself 3 days later. Not through the news. Not through the investigation. Through movement. Subtle. Quiet. But deliberate. Sophia Blake had disappeared. No messages. No calls. No explanation. Gone. And that confirmed everything Elena had already suspected. Sophia was not reacting. She was executing. Because people like Sophia do not wait for consequences. They move ahead of them. Elena returned to the one place she had not fully explored. Her father's study. A room untouched since his death. Locked. Preserved. Intentional. She entered it slowly. Not out of grief. Out of purpose. Because her father had not been careless. He had not built his life without anticipating risk. And now, that risk had surfaced. The desk remained exactly as he had left it. Clean. Organized. Nothing out of place. Except for one detail. A drawer that did not open fully. Elena noticed it immediately. Not because it was obvious. Because it resisted. Just slightly. She pulled it again. Measured. Firm. The drawer stopped halfway. Blocked. Not by damage. By design. Elena reached underneath. Felt along the base. And found it. A small release latch. Hidden. Deliberate. She pressed it. The drawer slid open the rest of the way. And, inside, everything changed. Documents. Not standard. Not surface level. Layered. Protected. Detailed. Account structures. Transfer triggers. Contingency plans. Every asset Elena had inherited was not freely accessible. It was conditional. Locked behind behavioral patterns. Legal confirmations. Time-based validations. And more importantly, fail-safes. If ownership was transferred under questionable conditions, the assets would freeze. If legal incompetency was declared without specific independent verification, the system would trigger. If accounts were accessed from unauthorized locations, they would shut down. Sophia had not disappeared randomly. She had tried to access something and failed. Elena continued reading, page after page, each one revealing a deeper layer of protection, a deeper level of foresight, until finally she found the note, handwritten, simple, direct. Elena, if you're reading this, it means someone close to you believed you were the easiest way to access what I built. They will not expect you to see them clearly. That is your advantage. Everything here is designed to protect you not from strangers, but from familiarity. Trust your instincts. They will try to take your certainty before they take anything else. Do not give it to them. Elena lowered the paper slowly, not emotional, not overwhelmed, certain. Because now the final piece was in place. Her father had known. Not who, not when, but that it would happen. And he had prepared for it. Not by warning her, by building a system that would hold even if she faltered, even if she was manipulated, even if she was targeted. The trap had already been set. Victor had walked into it. Sophia had triggered it. And now, the entire structure they had built was collapsing under its own design. Investigators followed the trail. Accounts frozen. Transfers flagged. Offshore movements traced. Communication logs recovered. Sophia's disappearance did not protect her. It exposed her. Because systems do not panic. They record. They preserve. They reveal. Within weeks, the network unraveled. Not just Victor. Not just Sophia. Others. Names Elena had never heard before. Connections she had never seen. All tied together by one assumption. That she would never notice. That she would never understand. That she would never fight back. They were wrong. Elena returned to the house one final time. Not to reclaim it. Not to restore it. To close it. The kitchen was exactly as she had left it. Clean. Still. Ordinary. She reached for a cup. Poured hot water. Added chamomile. Then honey. Stirred slowly. The same way Victor used to. The same rhythm. The same motion. But this time, there was no calculation behind it. No hidden intention. No observation. Just tea. She lifted the cup. Watched the steam rise. Felt the warmth in her hands. Real. Simple. Safe. And for a moment, she allowed herself to feel it. Not the fear. Not the anger. The clarity. Because everything that had happened, every layer of deception, every calculated move, had led to one truth. She had not survived by chance. She had survived by understanding. By restraint. By refusing to react when reacting would have destroyed her. By choosing strategy over emotion. And as she took a slow sip, her expression calm, her mind steady, one final thought settled into place. The tea in her hand was just tea now. And for the first time in months, she knew it was hers.